Classic Hollywood was a glamorous illusion, sparkling gowns, polished smiles, and a carefully controlled image. But behind the velvet curtains, affairs were common, and some left behind more than just broken hearts. They left behind children. Hidden, denied, or raised in secrecy, these affair babies were the industry's best-kept secrets. Some didn't learn the truth until decades later. Others were silenced from birth. And in a few cases, the resemblance was just too obvious to ignore. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the love children Hollywood tried to hide, and the untold stories that refused to stay buried. Charlie Chaplin and Joan Barry, Carol Ann's messy origins. Long before TMZ or social media could expose secrets in real time, Charlie Chaplin was already facing one of the most explosive scandals in Hollywood history. On screen, he was America's lovable tramp, a silent-era icon who brought laughter to millions. But off-screen, his reputation took a sharp turn when a paternity scandal nearly destroyed everything. In the early 1940s, Chaplin, who was already married to his third wife, actress Paulette Goddard, got involved with a young aspiring actress named Joan Barry. She was talented, ambitious, and completely unprepared for the chaos that would follow. Their affair quickly turned complicated, and when Barry gave birth to a baby girl named Carol and in 1943, she insisted Chaplin was the father. But Chaplin wasn't having it. He denied everything, refusing to acknowledge the child and demanding proof. That's when things took a darker turn. Barry didn't just accuse him of being a deadbeat dad, she took him to court and slapped him with a paternity suit. 3 separate blood tests showed that Chaplin wasn't the biological father, but Joan wouldn't back down. She believed the tests were manipulated, and she was determined to make Chaplin pay. What followed was one of the most bizarre and heavily publicized legal battles of the decade. The scandal rocked the country. Chaplin, once beloved, was now being investigated by the FBI. Joan Barry even accused him of violating the Mann Act, alleging that he transported her across state lines for immoral purposes. That accusation alone could have landed him in prison. But it was the paternity case that grabbed the headlines. Despite the scientific evidence clearing him, the second trial ended in a shock decision. The jury ruled 11-1 that Chaplin was the father and ordered him to pay child support. It was a legal decision based not on biology, but on public perception, and it cost him dearly. The case humiliated Chaplin and triggered a wave of backlash that nearly ended his career in the U.S. The press had a field day, painting him as a manipulative predator, while his fans were torn between sympathy and outrage. It didn't matter that the blood tests said he wasn't the father. In the eyes of the court and the public, he was guilty. And just like that, the man who had once brought joy to millions became a cautionary tale about fame, scandal, and the price of secrecy in Hollywood. Ronan Farrow, Sinatra's secret son? Ronan Farrow wasn't born in the golden age of Hollywood, but his story is forever tied to one of its most legendary names, Frank Sinatra. Officially, Ronan is the son of Mia Farrow and Woody Allen. But one look at his piercing blue eyes and razor-sharp cheekbones, and fans couldn't help but notice. He looks nothing like Allen, and everything like Sinatra. As Ronan rose to fame in journalism, breaking massive stories like the Harvey Weinstein exposé, his resemblance to Old Blue Eyes became too glaring to ignore. Mia Farrow didn't exactly put the rumors to rest. In fact, she did the opposite. In a 2013 Vanity Fair interview, she casually dropped a bombshell, saying that she and Frank Sinatra never really split up, even after their 1968 divorce. That single sentence reignited decades of speculation. Could Ronan actually be Sinatra's biological son? The math checks out. He was born in 1987, long after Mia's split with Sinatra, but also during a time when she and Woody Allen were supposedly together. And yet, Mia's quote suggested that something else was going on behind the scenes. The public fascination with this theory has never let up. Ronan, for his part, refuses to take a DNA test. When asked, he simply says that Woody Allen was his father legally, ethically, and personally. But to this day, people continue to compare photos, analyze timelines, and piece together clues like amateur detectives. Even close friends of the family have hinted at the possibility, saying that Ronan always felt different from Alan and bore an uncanny resemblance to Sinatra's children. And here's the kicker: Frank Sinatra never publicly denied the possibility. He was long divorced from Mia, but he remained close to her for years, so close that some believe they never truly ended their relationship. Mia herself has never confirmed it outright, but her offhand comments have only added fuel to the fire. Ronan, meanwhile, has become one of the most respected investigative journalists in the country, but he's also become a walking mystery. Whether or not the truth ever comes out, this story has already taken its place in Hollywood folklore. It's not just a paternity mystery. It's a legacy puzzle involving one of the most iconic voices of the 20th century and one of the sharpest minds of the 21st. And the resemblance? It speaks louder than words ever could. Joan Jackson's hidden daughter. Hidden in plain sight for decades, the daughter of Joan Jackson, the notorious patriarch behind the Jackson family dynasty, Joanne didn't just grow up in secrecy. She grew up 5 miles from the very mansion where Michael, Janet, and the rest of the Jackson kids were being trained into global superstars. While the world saw Joe as a strict, driven manager who molded his children into icons, he was quietly living a second life with a different woman, and a daughter no one knew existed. It all started in the early 1970s when Joe met Cheryl Terrell, a young secretary working for the LAPD. They crossed paths at a Christmas party, and according to Joanne, Cheryl had no idea who Joe Jackson even was. But he was persistent, charming, and relentless. Despite being married to Katherine Jackson and nearly 2 decades older than Cheryl, Joe swept her into an affair that would last 25 years. The result of that relationship was Joanne, a child raised in the shadows of one of music's most famous families. Joe wasn't an absent father, at least, not to Joanne. He visited often, brought her favorite black walnut ice cream, lavished her with gifts, and played the role of doting dad. But there were rules. She wasn't allowed to tell anyone who he was. She couldn't visit certain places, couldn't go to certain stores, and certainly couldn't reveal her last name. Joe warned her constantly. If anyone found out, everything could fall apart. And so, for years, Joanne lived a double life, caught between 2 worlds: the quiet house with her mother and the glamorous world she could never fully enter. Eventually, the truth came out. As Joanne got older, the whispers became louder. She finally went public with her story, publishing a memoir titled Bastard Child, a raw, personal account of growing up in secrecy and longing for acknowledgement. At first, the reaction was mixed. But over time, even the Jackson family began to accept her. And surprisingly, so did Katherine. After decades of betrayal and silence, Joe's wife forgave him and took him back. Joanne's story is one of hidden love, stolen identity, and a family built on secrets. She didn't ask to be a scandal, but like so many children of classic Hollywood affairs, she became living proof that even the most carefully guarded secrets eventually find the light. Liv Tyler, the daughter of rock and secrecy. For the first 11 years of her life, she had no idea that her real father was one of the biggest rock stars on the planet. Liv was raised to believe that musician Todd Rundgren was her dad. He loved her, supported her, and even signed her birth certificate. But behind that well-meaning deception was a secret that her mother, former model Bebe Buell, had kept carefully buried. Steven Tyler, the wild frontman of Aerosmith, was Liv's biological father. In the 1970s, Bebe Buell was known for her relationships with rock musicians as much as her modeling career. She had a long-term relationship with Rundgren, but in 1976, a brief and chaotic fling with Steven Tyler changed everything. Buell became pregnant, and knowing Tyler's heavy drug use at the time, she made a difficult decision. She chose to raise Liv in a stable environment, naming Rundgren as the father and keeping the truth from everyone, including her daughter. But secrets have a way of surfacing. As Liv got older, she began to notice something strange, an uncanny resemblance between herself and another girl, Mia Tyler, Steven's daughter from a different relationship. Liv confronted her mother, and at just 11 years old, she learned the truth. Steven Tyler was her biological father. The revelation was shocking, but it also made a lot of things click. The connection was undeniable, and from that moment on, a new chapter began. In 1991, Liv changed her last name from Rundgren to Tyler and slowly built a relationship with a man she had unknowingly idolized from afar. What's remarkable about her story is how gracefully she navigated the truth. She remained close with both men, grateful to Rundgren for being there when it mattered and open to forging a real bond with Tyler. Over the years, they've even collaborated professionally, with Steven appearing alongside her at events and supporting her acting career. Liv didn't just find out who her father was, she found a way to embrace both parts of her identity. And despite the complicated beginnings, she went on to become a major Hollywood star in her own right. From Armageddon to The Lord of the Rings, she stepped out of the shadows of rock royalty and carved her own path. In a world where secrets often bring pain, Liv's story became one of healing and unexpected connection. Scott Eastwood, Clint's affair child who refused nepotism. Scott Eastwood grew up knowing exactly who his father was, but he also knew that name came with weight, pressure, and expectations he didn't want handed to him. Clint Eastwood, the rugged face of American cinema, was already a legend by the 1980s. Married, respected, and idolized. But that didn't stop him from having a quiet, off-the-record affair with Jacelyn Reeves, a flight attendant living a life far outside Hollywood's spotlight. That affair produced 2 children, Scott and his sister, Catherine. And for a long time, no one in the public had a clue. Unlike other stars who distanced themselves from their secret children, Clint didn't run. He stayed involved. Scott spent much of his childhood on his dad's ranch in Northern California, riding horses, watching film sets, and absorbing the grit and discipline that defined his father's career. But despite the access and connection, Clint never rolled out the red carpet. He didn't give Scott a shortcut to fame. He gave him a work ethic. If Scott wanted to succeed, he had to do it the hard way. Determined to earn his place without leaning on the Eastwood name, Scott started out using his mother's last name, Reeves, during auditions. He bartended at night in San Diego and drove up to LA by day to chase casting calls. Rejections were constant. He struggled, hustled, and grinded through years of thankless roles before finally getting noticed on his own merit. That's when he finally switched back to Eastwood, not as a crutch, but as a badge he had earned. Now, Scott Eastwood is no longer just Clint's son. He's a force in his own right, starring in major action films like Fury, The Longest Ride, Suicide Squad, and Pacific Rim Uprising. And unlike some celebrity kids who crumble under their parents' shadow, Scott embraced the lessons without relying on the legacy. He grew up with a father who believed in tough love, and it shaped him into someone who could take a punch, both on and off screen. In many ways, Scott's story isn't just about a Hollywood affair. It's about rising above it. He didn't come from a picture-perfect family, and he never pretended otherwise. But what he did do was prove that being born out of scandal doesn't define you. What you build after, that's the real legacy. And Scott Eastwood built his brick by brick. Not every love child from classic Hollywood got a full spotlight, or even public confirmation. But that didn't stop the rumors from spreading like wildfire. Some stories stayed whispers. Others became open secrets. And a few were just too eerie to ignore. Take Judy Lewis, for example, the daughter of Loretta Young and, allegedly, Clark Gable. Loretta was a rising star in the 1930s, and Gable was already Hollywood royalty. Their secret affair on the set of Call of the Wild in 1935 reportedly led to Judy's birth. But instead of acknowledging her, Loretta quietly disappeared from the spotlight for a year, then returned, claiming she had adopted a child. For decades, Judy believed that story. But the truth eventually emerged. Her ears, her jawline, even her smile, they all mirrored Gable's. And when the dots connected, it became clear. Judy wasn't adopted at all. She was hidden. Gable never publicly claimed her, and Young only confessed the truth to her daughter in the final years of her life. Then there's Errol Flynn, one of the most dashing men of his era, and one of the most reckless. Flynn's reputation for womanizing was legendary. During World War II, while entertaining troops and bouncing between overseas sets, Flynn was rumored to have fathered multiple children across continents. None were ever formally acknowledged, but rumors swirled from Europe to the Caribbean. Several women later claimed he had left behind more than just charm. But without DNA tests or public admissions, the truth was buried right alongside him. And of course, there's the Desi Arnaz Whisper Network. Best known for I Love Lucy and his turbulent marriage to Lucille Ball, Arnaz's off-screen life was far messier than the sitcoms ever let on. Known for his affairs and late-night escapades, Desi was rumored to have fathered children outside his marriage, some reportedly in Cuba, others possibly in Los Angeles. Nothing was ever confirmed. But those close to him say the stories weren't just gossip. They were Hollywood's worst-kept secret. These rumored love children may never get full confirmation. No courtroom battles. No memoirs. No interviews. But in the shadows of old Hollywood, they remain part of the lore, a reminder that the golden age was polished on the outside, but chaotic underneath. Secrets didn't stay hidden because they were small. They stayed hidden because no one dared to ask the right questions. Until now. Classic Hollywood sold a fantasy, one of elegance, perfection, and untouchable stars. But behind the spotlights were real people with messy lives, secret affairs, and children they tried to hide from the world. Some of those children became stars themselves. Others lived in silence, waiting for the truth to catch up. But whether embraced or denied, they all share one thing: proof that even the most glamorous illusions can't hide reality forever. These stories aren't just scandals, they're legacy. And in the end, it's not the secrets that define Hollywood's golden age. It's the people who survived them.